In the dead of night, a weary taxi driver in a forgotten Pennsylvania town picks up what seems like just another strange fare. A barefoot woman in a torn evening gown, soaked from rain and wild-eyed with terror. She won't say her name, won't call the cops, and begs him to just drive. What Jake Mallory doesn't know yet is that the woman in his back seat isn't a victim of some petty crime. She's Evangeline Rothschild, a long-missing heiress from one of America's wealthiest families, and the people hunting her will stop at nothing to make sure she never resurfaces. As Jake and Eva race through back roads and dark forests, chased by powerful men with deep pockets and no conscience, they form an unlikely bond. For Jake, haunted by the unsolved disappearance of his own daughter, helping Eva might be his last shot at redemption. For Eva, Jake is the only person who's treated her like more than a paycheck or a problem to be erased. What begins as a desperate escape spirals into a national scandal, a courtroom showdown, and a shot at justice that could upend the lives of the rich and corrupt. This is a story of survival, truth, and one last chance to set things right. The clock on Jake Mallory's dashboard flickered. 11:47 p.m. The glowing green digits were the only source of light in the cab, aside from the dim wash of passing street lamps. The streets of Hartwell, Pennsylvania were silent as usual, the kind of silence that pressed in from all sides, like fog. Jake sipped lukewarm coffee from a dented thermos, its bitterness a reminder that he hadn't eaten a proper meal since lunch. Or maybe yesterday. He wasn't sure anymore. He turned up the heater and cracked his window. The town was always too hot or too cold, too wet or too dry. Tonight it was drenched. Rain pelted the windshield like 1,000 impatient fingers, and the wipers barely kept up. Jake squinted through the downpour as his dispatcher crackled to life through the radio. Unit 9, got a call. Pick up on County Road 12 near the old Miller barn. Name not given. Sounded urgent. Jake frowned. County Road 12 was practically off the grid. Miles of woods, barely maintained gravel, and nothing around for a good 5 miles in any direction. But work was work, and in a town like Hartwell, night shifts didn't offer many fares. Copy that, Jake muttered, switching on his turn signal out of habit, though no one was around to see it. As he drove, memories drifted in uninvited. His daughter's laugh, her yellow rain boots, the last voicemail she'd left. Jake shook them off like he always did. There were parts of himself he kept locked in the glove box of his mind, hidden under a stack of unpaid bills and fading family photos. 10 minutes later, he reached the edge of County Road 12. The rain had turned the path into a slick ribbon of mud. Trees leaned in from either side like silent watchers, branches creaking with each gust of wind. Jake slowed the cab and rolled down his window to listen. That's when he saw her. A figure hunched near the edge of the road, one arm waving weakly as if swatting at ghosts. Jake pulled the cab to a stop, heart ticking just a little faster. She stepped into the light, barefoot, soaked to the skin. Her gown, yes, a full evening gown, clung to her frame like it had grown from her bones. Mud smeared her shins and blood crusted a gash on her forehead. Her eyes were wide, frantic, scanning the tree line behind her. She looked like she'd run straight out of someone's worst nightmare. Jake unlocked the doors. "Get in," he said. "Hurry." She didn't speak, just yanked open the door and collapsed into the back seat, curling in on herself like a terrified child. Jake threw the cab in gear and sped off, tires kicking up muddy spray. For a minute, neither of them said a word. Then her voice, cracked, quiet, trembling. "Please don't stop until we're somewhere, anywhere, with people." Jake glanced at her in the rearview mirror. Her eyes were haunted, not high, not drunk, not crazy, just terrified. "You okay?" he asked gently. "Do you need a hospital?" "No," she said quickly, too quickly. "No police, no questions, just keep driving." Jake hesitated, thumb resting on the dial for the radio. Something about the girl triggered every alarm bell in his head, but he also knew fear when he saw it. Real fear. "All right," he said, turning back onto the main road. "We'll head toward town. I know a late-night diner where we can sit and warm up. Sounds good?" She didn't answer, just curled tighter. Jake didn't press her. He adjusted the rear view again and checked the road ahead, and that's when he noticed the headlights, a pair of them. No sirens, no markings, just far enough back to look casual, but too close for comfort. He glanced at his speedometer. He wasn't driving slow. "Trouble?" the woman asked, noticing his glance. "Maybe," Jake said. "Let's find out." He tapped the gas, increasing speed slowly, watching the headlights behind them do the same. And just like that, Jake Mallory's night shifted from quiet desperation to something else entirely, something dangerous, something deadly. He didn't know the name of the woman in his cab, but he could already feel it deep in his gut. This wasn't just another ride, this was a crossroads. And whatever waited at the end of it was going to change everything. Jake drove in silence, but his mind was spinning like tires on ice. The headlights behind him hadn't disappeared. Whoever it was, they were keeping a precise distance, never falling too far back, never getting close enough to pass. It wasn't a coincidence. Someone was following them. The woman in the back seat hadn't moved since she got in, but now she spoke, so softly, Jake almost didn't catch it. "They found me." Jake glanced at the mirror. Who did? She didn't answer. "I need something to go on, lady. If someone's coming after you, I gotta know what kind of fire I'm standing in." The woman straightened slowly, as if every muscle resisted. Her wet hair clung to her cheeks. She looked up into the mirror. "My name is Eva," she said, voice ragged. "I can't go to the police. If they take me back, I won't come out again. You have to trust me." Jake opened his mouth, then closed it. That wasn't the kind of line a sane person just dropped casually, but there was no madness in her eyes, just desperation. "All right, Eva," he said. "You trust me, I trust you." She sank back in relief. 5 minutes later, they reached the edge of Hartwell proper. The neon buzz of the 24-hour Beacon Diner bled through the rain like a lighthouse. Jake pulled into the lot, headlights sweeping over a line of pickups and a single rusted sedan. The car that had been tailing them kept going right past the diner entrance, out toward Route 87. Jake sat still for a second. "Either they gave up," he muttered, "or they're circling the block." Eva stirred. "Let's go inside." The diner smelled like grease, burnt coffee, and old jukebox records. Perfect. Jake guided Eva to a booth in the back. The waitress, a woman in her 60s with an ashtray voice and 4 visible tattoos, dropped 2 menus without a word. Eva curled her hands around the hot mug of tea Jake ordered for her and stared at the table. "You're not just running from a bad date," Jake said, keeping his tone light. "No," she whispered, "you're not just a hitchhiker in a prom dress." "No." He leaned closer. "Then what the hell are you?" Eva looked up. Her eyes burned like someone who'd crawled through hell and wasn't done yet. "I was taken," she said, "held, hidden for years, and I just escaped tonight." Jake's stomach tightened. "You mean kidnapped?" She nodded slowly. Jake sat back, processing. This wasn't his fight. He drove people from point A to point B. No drama, no blood. But he couldn't forget how she looked when he picked her up. like someone who hadn't seen kindness in a very long time. "Okay," he said finally, "then let's keep you gone." And from the window, behind streaks of rain and glass, someone watched them. They had only made it 3 miles past the diner when Jake noticed the SUV again. Black. No plates. No lights except the headlights. Same one from earlier. "Company," he said, glancing at Eva. Her face paled. "That's them." Jake pressed his foot down. The taxi jolted forward, tires squealing as they hit the wet blacktop. The SUV sped up. Jake's eyes darted to his side mirror. The road ahead narrowed into a bottleneck curve flanked by dense trees. No exits. No chance to turn. "They're trying to corner us," he said. Eva looked behind. "They won't let you take me far. If they catch us, I'll disappear again, and you—" She didn't need to finish. Jake gritted his teeth and jerked the wheel right, cutting onto a gravel logging road. The cab bounced and shuddered violently, but it held. The SUV followed close. "There's a maintenance turnoff," Eva gasped. "I remember. Left, just past the broken sign." Jake spotted it. The cab skidded around the corner, scraping past overgrowth and dead branches. The SUV wasn't so lucky. It clipped a tree root and swerved into a shallow ditch. Jake didn't stop. They shot down the path, mud slinging into the night behind them. After a minute, Jake eased off the gas. Silence. No headlights. He exhaled. So did Eva. Then, from the back seat, her voice broke the silence. "I wasn't supposed to survive. They said no one would care, no one would look." Jake's hands tightened on the wheel. They were wrong. They drove on, the night closing in around them. The storm broke just after midnight. Rain poured like the sky had ripped open, hammering the windshield in thick sheets. Jake squinted through the blur, wipers thudding a frantic rhythm. The gravel road had given way to cracked asphalt, winding through the outskirts of town where buildings stood like forgotten relics. He turned into the parking lot of an old auto shop with a flickering sign. Rusty's, tires, brakes, burgers. The building was long closed for the night, but Jake knew Rusty stashed an emergency gas can and some tools in the shed around back. More importantly, it had a back lot where no one would see his cab. He killed the headlights. Eva sat curled in the passenger seat now, wrapped in a mechanic's jacket Jake had found in the trunk. Her bare feet rested on the floor heater. Her hands trembled not from cold, but from memory. "Are you hungry?" Jake asked gently. She gave a tiny nod. He handed her a protein bar from the glove compartment, part of his emergency stash. She tore into it like someone who hadn't eaten in days. "Eva," he said quietly, "what you told me in the diner, was that all of it?" She hesitated. "No." Jake waited. She took a shaky breath. "They kept me on a private estate, guarded. No phones, no windows that opened. I wasn't alone at first. There were others, I think, but I was the only one they never let out of sight. I escaped because something changed. I think they were going to move me or end it." Jake didn't move. He didn't speak. But something in him cracked wide open. His daughter had been 12 when she vanished. 1 minute at a gas station, gone the next. The cop said she'd probably been taken by someone passing through. No evidence, no trail, just silence. And now this woman, Eva, whatever her full story, looked like someone who'd lived the same nightmare. "Do you know who they were?" Jake asked. She hesitated. Then, "They worked for my uncle." Jake blinked. "Your uncle?" She nodded. "He wanted me gone. I was the only heir. My father died in a plane crash 5 years ago. My mother was already gone. My uncle took over the estate, the business, but I was still legally next in line, so he made me disappear. Jake started. What's your full name? She hesitated, then finally she whispered it. Evangeline Rothschild. Time stopped. Jake had heard that name years ago, national headlines. Billionaire heiress vanishes at sea. Yacht party. No remains found. Presumed dead. He exhaled slowly. Holy hell. I was 17, she said. I'm 20 now. Jake rubbed his temples. Eva, if you are who you say you are, your return could blow the lid off everything. She met his eyes. That's why I need you. And for the first time he realized she wasn't just scared. She was preparing for war. Jake sat in the dim light of the cab, phone to his ear, heart hammering in his chest. Come on, pick up. 3 rings, 4, then... Mallory? The voice on the other end was groggy. It's 1 a.m. If this isn't about bourbon or baseball. It's about Rothschild, Jake cut in. Silence. You mean that Rothschild? Jake glanced at Eva, asleep in the back seat now, her head resting against the window. I've got the girl, the missing one. I think it's her. A long pause. Are you sober? Dead serious. The man on the other end was Terry Blythe, a freelance investigative reporter who'd once blown open a political scandal involving the Pennsylvania governor. Jake had driven him home from more bars than he could count. But Terry had a memory like a steel trap and a nose for buried stories. Jake explained everything, her condition, her story, the name she gave. Could be a scam, Terry muttered, though his voice was sharpening with interest. I found a locket in her jacket, Jake said. Inside is a family crest. Rothschilds. I checked. The real deal. That story was airtight, Terry murmured. Yacht disappeared off the Carolina coast. Empty life raft. Uncle took over everything within 6 months. Some people whispered, but money silenced most of them. Jake looked at Eva again. Even in sleep, her brow was furrowed, like she was bracing for impact. Can you dig? Jake asked. Quietly? I can try, Terry said. But if this gets out... I know, Jake said. Just be careful. He ended the call and leaned back in the seat. The rain had slowed now, becoming a dull mist. He watched it bead on the windshield, thoughts racing. If Eva was telling the truth, and every bone in his body said she was, then she wasn't just a passenger anymore. She was the key to unraveling a billion-dollar lie, and someone powerful was going to do anything to silence her. Jake reached down, gripping the locket tighter in his hand. He didn't know where this road would end, but he'd already decided. He wasn't going to let her vanish again. Jake didn't sleep that night. He couldn't. After Eva fell into a restless doze, he stayed behind the wheel in the dark lot, watching shadows stretch under the floodlights. Every passing car made him tighten his grip on the steering wheel. Every flicker of movement in the corner of his eye could have been them, whoever they were. Just before dawn, his phone buzzed. Terry Blythe. Jake answered on the first ring. You sitting down? Terry said. Been sitting all night. Terry let out a breath. I started digging quietly. Some things weren't hard to find. Public records, news archives. Others took some finesse. But Jake, I think she's telling the truth. Jake closed his eyes. Terry continued. The Rothschild family trust shifted its structure 6 months after Evangeline's disappearance. Everything transferred to the uncle, Gerald Rothschild. Businesses, estates, even offshore assets, all legal. but only if Evangeline was declared dead, which she was, based on a report filed by a private investigator hired by Gerald. Jake's jaw tightened. So the guy who stood to gain everything paid to prove she was gone. Exactly. And here's the kicker. Gerald Rothschild is currently in talks to sell off parts of the company to a defense contractor. Billions on the line. You can bet your ass he doesn't want a missing heiress suddenly showing up with a story that burns it all down. Jake looked toward the back seat. Eva was still sleeping, twitching now and then, like she was stuck in a nightmare. "Where do I take her?" he asked. Terry hesitated. "If she goes public, it needs to be through someone airtight, not just cops. You need federal help, a legal team, maybe even press backup. But you've got to be careful. Gerald's got influence. He can buy silence, or worse." "Got any names?" "Yeah," Terry said. "But give me 6 hours. I'll send you a burner phone and a list. Keep moving until then." Jake hung up, mind buzzing. He turned the key and the engine rumbled to life. "Where are we going?" Eva murmured. He looked back at her. Someplace they won't expect. And just like that, the cab rolled out into the morning fog. 2 fugitives from a world that wanted one of them dead and the other to stay forgotten. They didn't get far. Jake had taken back roads out of Hartwell, winding through state forest trails and forgotten township lines. The plan was to hole up for a few hours at a family friend's hunting cabin deep in the Alleghenies. No cell signal, no neighbors, no paper trail. It should have been safe. But safety, Jake realized, was a memory they couldn't afford anymore. The SUV reappeared just before noon. He spotted it in the rear view, lurking like a ghost along a tree-lined stretch of road. Black again. No tags. Different from the one before, but same style, same rhythm. Eva saw it too. That's them. No doubt. No doubt. Jake made a hard right onto a narrow, unpaved logging trail. Mud splashed the windows. Tree branches scraped the sides. The cab bucked with every dip and rut, but Jake kept his foot on the gas. The SUV followed. "They're gaining," Eva said, clutching the dashboard. "I know." Jake jerked the wheel left, veering off the trail into thicker woods. The cab wasn't built for off-roading, but he didn't care. He barreled through brush and over rocks, windshield streaked with mud and pine needles. Gunshots cracked behind them, short, sharp bursts. "Down!" Jake shouted. Eva ducked behind the passenger seat. Jake swerved again, clipped a stump, and the car fishtailed. They slammed to a stop in a shallow ravine. The engine sputtered but held. "Out!" Jake barked. "Now!" He grabbed a flashlight and a utility knife from the glove box. Eva scrambled out after him. They took off on foot through the forest, ducking branches, breath puffing in the cold air. "There's an old ranger station up ahead," Eva gasped. "I saw it when they moved me. It should be abandoned." "Lead the way." They ran, boots thudding against the soaked ground, hearts thudding louder. Behind them, the crash of underbrush signaled their pursuers were close. Then, like a ghost rising from the earth, the outline of a small wooden cabin emerged through the trees. Jake threw open the door. It creaked off one hinge. Inside, dust, decay, broken furniture, and silence. He bolted the door behind them just as footsteps pounded past the clearing. They crouched in the dark, barely breathing. Minutes passed, maybe more, then silence returned. Eva slumped against the wall, shaking. Jake handed her a bottle of water from his bag. "You okay?" She nodded faintly. "They won't stop. They'll never stop." Jake looked around the room. No signal, no radio, but for the moment, they were alive. "We'll make a plan," he said. "One step at a time." Eva looked up at him. "Why are you helping me?" Jake hesitated. "Because once," he said, "someone should have helped my daughter, and didn't." And in that broken-down ranger station, deep in the woods and hunted by killers, something shifted. They weren't just running anymore. They were surviving, together. The ranger station was barely holding together, rotten wood, shattered windows, and the unmistakable smell of mildew, but to Eva, it felt like a palace. Jake piled up a makeshift barricade at the door, using a fallen bookshelf and an old refrigerator door he found behind the cabin. Then he lit a lantern from his emergency kit, casting a warm flicker that danced over the faded ranger posters still clinging to the walls. Eva sat on a cot in the corner, wrapped in a moth-eaten blanket. She looked up at Jake as he knelt and poured iodine over a nasty scrape on her shin. "You're good at this," she murmured. "Spent half my life trying to keep things from falling apart," he said with a shrug. "Didn't always work." There was a pause. Then Eva said, "You want to know what happened to me?" Jake didn't answer, but the silence between them gave her room. "I remember the night it happened," she said. "The yacht party, champagne, fireworks. I thought I was living in a dream. Then someone drugged my drink. I woke up on a plane, private, cold. I was in a concrete room for months, no windows, then a compound, somewhere remote. I only saw 3 people in total, and they were all hired to keep me quiet or hidden." Jake listened without interrupting. "Sometimes I'd hear the ocean, sometimes silence, no TV, no internet. Once a month they'd make me dress up, pretend to be fine, for photos. I think it was to prove I was still alive, just not to the public." Jake's hands were still. "How did you escape?" "One of the guards got lazy," she said. "Fell asleep. I found keys, a door. Then I ran for hours. I don't know where I was. Found a road. Then you." She looked up at him. "I don't know who I am out here," she admitted. "But I know who I'm not. I'm not someone they get to erase." Jake nodded slowly. "Then let's make sure the world hears you." Dawn broke in thin streaks of gold through the forest canopy. Birds chirped as if the world wasn't on fire. Jake stepped outside the cabin with a battered map and an old ranger radio he'd scavenged. No signal, but maybe higher ground would offer something. Inside, Eva was going through the only item she'd clung to since the night she escaped, her father's pocket watch. Silver, scratched but still ticking. She clicked it open. Inside was a photo of her as a child, riding on his shoulders. "My dad would have never let this happen," she said when Jake returned. "He's the reason you're still fighting," Jake replied. "He gave you that spine." Eva smiled faintly, then asked, "Your daughter, what happened to her?" Jake hesitated. Then I sat down. "Her name was Lily. She was 12, vanished at a rest stop on I-79. I left her in the car for 5 minutes to use the bathroom. 5 minutes. When I came back, gone. No witnesses, no leads. It was like she never existed." Eva reached over and took his hand. "I've never stopped looking," he said. "Never stopped blaming myself." "That's why you helped me." He nodded. "I saw it in your eyes, that same look, like you're halfway between disappearing and screaming." She squeezed his hand. "Then let's scream together." Jake checked the old ranger map. "There's a town about 30 miles northeast. If we can get to a motel and lay low, my contact can meet us there." Eva's eyes lit with hope. "Then we move." They left the cabin before noon, moving quickly and quietly through the woods. Neither of them noticed the motion-triggered camera strapped to a nearby tree, or the blinking red light that had just started to flash. They arrived in the town of Coldwell Junction just before dusk. The streets were empty except for a few teenagers on bikes and a man locking up a bait shop. Jake booked a room at the Deerfield Motel, paid in cash, and parked the cab out back behind a trash enclosure. The place smelled like old cigarettes and industrial cleaner, but it was safe for now. Jake used the motel's landline to call the number Terry had texted him that morning. The voice that answered was clipped and cautious. "You Jake Mallory?" "Yeah?" "This is Laura." Jake stiffened. "Laura?" "Detective Laura Mallory," the voice said flatly. "Terry said you needed someone who doesn't scare easily." Jake gritted his teeth. Of course, his ex-wife. Laura had been the best cop Hartwell ever had, and the toughest woman Jake ever knew. Their marriage hadn't survived the grief of losing Lily, but her instinct and loyalty had never faltered. "Still good at finding ghosts?" he asked. "Only the ones who want to be found," she replied. Jake filled her in quickly. Everything, Eva's story, the men following them, Gerald Rothschild, the attempt on their lives. When he finished, Laura said, "All right, I've got contacts at the bureau, quiet ones. We'll need evidence, proof she is who she says, and protection, witness status. Can you get us that?" "Meet me at the old rock quarry north of town," she said. "No phones, no tails, midnight." Jake hung up and turned to Eva. "Good news," he said. "We've got backup." She looked skeptical. "Can we trust her?" Jake gave a half smile. "If anyone hates corruption more than I do, it's her." Outside the motel, two figures sat in a parked sedan, cameras ready, engine idling. Inside, Eva whispered, "Jake, what if they already know where we are?" He looked out the window. The hair on his neck stood up. "They might," he said, "which means tonight needs to go exactly right. And if it didn't, they might not survive to see the morning." Midnight cloaked the quarry in darkness. The moon hung low, barely peeking through a cloud-draped sky. The only sound was the crunch of gravel under Jake's boots as he led Eva toward the hollowed-out clearing surrounded by rock walls and memories. They stopped at the center, lit only by the faint glow of Jake's flashlight. Then a second beam cut through the night. Laura Mallory stepped forward, tall, sharp-eyed, and no-nonsense, her coat flapping in the breeze like a badge of honor. She looked first at Jake, then Eva. "So, this is the girl who shook a billion-dollar empire?" Eva straightened, eyes wary. "Depends. You here to help or turn me in?" Laura gave a nod of respect. "I'm here because I've seen too many people like you get buried. I won't let it happen again." They didn't waste time. Laura opened a briefcase and pulled out a small body cam. "We record her testimony, upload it directly to a secure bureau archive. If anything happens to her or any of us, it gets released." Jake looked at Eva. "You ready for this?" Eva hesitated, then stepped into the beam of light. And for the next 20 minutes she told the world everything. Names, places, dates, the compound, her escape, the threats, the men who followed them, and finally, her uncle, Gerald Rothschild, the man behind it all. When she was done, her voice trembled. But she stood tall. Laura switched off the camera. "I'll get this to the bureau tonight, quietly. But once they know, there's no going back. Gerald's people will double down." Jake nodded. "Then we make noise." By morning, the video had been uploaded to 6 different encrypted drives and sent to 3 trusted journalists. They couldn't silence her now. Jake knew it wouldn't take long. The next night, a message came in through the burner phone, a fake meetup, supposedly from one of Terry's sources. Evidence drop-off, train yard, 10:30 p.m. Too clean, too scripted. Trap, Laura said. Bait, Jake agreed. Let's spring it. They moved quickly. Eva stayed in a secure safe house with Laura while Jake prepared the setup. With the Bureau finally on board, they coordinated an ambush with federal agents. Jake pulled into the abandoned Ash Grove train yard just before 10:30, headlights off, windows down. He parked in the middle of the open lot, stepped out, and waited. It didn't take long. A black van pulled in from the north gate, then another. A third vehicle flanked him from behind. 3 men emerged, suits, tactical gear, silenced weapons. They moved in formation. One of them spoke. Where is she? Jake didn't move. You're not here for her. You're here to make sure no one listens. The man raised his gun. Spotlights exploded from the perimeter. FBI, drop your weapons! Agents flooded the yard, shouts, screams. Gunfire lit the air in rapid bursts. Jake dove behind his car as bullets shattered windows. One of the SUVs peeled away, only to be rammed by an undercover truck. By the time the chaos ended, all 3 men were cuffed. 1 had been wounded. All were carrying burner phones, encrypted drives, and 1 had a Rothschild family crest on a signet ring. Proof. Jake stood amid the wreckage, adrenaline still surging. Think Gerald got the message? Laura smirked. He's about to. The courtroom was packed. Reporters, Rothschild executives, curious citizens, protesters, security tighter than a bank vault. People versus Gerald Rothschild was the trial of the decade. Eva took the stand wearing a dark suit and calm resolve. Her hair was pulled back, her voice steady. When she spoke, the entire room leaned forward. She told her story again, only this time with power. She showed photos of the compound, described the men who watched her, named the shell companies her uncle used to launder estate funds. Backed by FBI forensic data and video testimony, her claims painted a picture of a man who believed wealth made him untouchable. Gerald Rothschild never spoke during the trial. His lawyers did the talking, spinning tales of mental illness, media manipulation, and faked evidence. But Eva never wavered. On the 5th day, the jury delivered their verdict. Guilty. Conspiracy to commit fraud. Conspiracy to kidnap. Attempted murder. As Gerald was led away in cuffs, Eva looked across the courtroom at Jake. Tears welled in her eyes, but she smiled. Freedom at last. Eva stood on the steps of the courthouse, surrounded by a wall of microphones and flashing cameras. She made her statement with grace and clarity, then turned to Jake. "You sure you won't take the reward?" she asked quietly. "You saved my life." Jake smiled. "I don't need your money." She stepped closer. "Then what do you want?" Jake pulled a small photo from his pocket, a young girl with a wide smile and yellow rain boots. "My daughter," he said. "Lily, she's still out there somewhere. I want to keep looking." Eva looked down at the photo. "Then I'll help." "You've got an empire to rebuild," Jake said. "I'm rebuilding it for people who've been forgotten," she replied. "Like her, like me." She hugged him tightly. "Goodbye, Jake." He watched her get into a black car with tinted windows and a security detail, off to start her new life. Jake turned, stepped back into his cab, and drove into the morning light. Weeks passed. The story faded from the front pages, replaced by newer headlines. But the legacy remained. Eva Rothschild launched the Phoenix Foundation, a nonprofit dedicated to rescuing trafficking victims and reopening cold cases. Donations poured in, survivors spoke out, and powerful men began to sweat. Jake went back to driving, not because he needed to, but because the road was still calling. One night, as he returned to his small apartment, a letter waited at his door. No return address. Inside, a photo of a girl, older now, but familiar. Lily. A note was attached. "She's alive. I've seen her. Will explain everything. Wait for my call." No signature. Jake stared at the photo, heart pounding. The road wasn't over yet, not even close.